Thanks a lot, Asifa. Colleagues, we've heard the experiences from colleagues in 3 different think tank organizations, and you have your experiences as well. So with the help of Lily, we do have some questions that we can project for the small group sessions. So we hope that through these questions, we'll be able to get at the experiences in your different think tank organizations around commissioned work and long-term research. For those who are at a table by themselves, feel free to join another table. And eventually we'll ask each of the 3 resource persons as well to join a different table for the small group discussion. So we have about 35 minutes in the small group discussions. And we have 5 questions. The first 3 are really related to getting your experience in your think tank organization on the table before we start to come to a synthesis about the approaches and strategies for effectively combining commissioned work and long-term research, and then also understanding the conditions for that to work. For example, we've been hearing about the necessity to, if you take commissioned work, to negotiate with the contractor to have rights to publish, to have the rights to reuse the data. So those are some of the conditions to make the work with commissioned work appropriate in the think tank context. So the 5 questions we propose, you don't have to go through all of them, but do try to make sure you focus on 4 and 5. And I'll start with those. The 4th one is identify the approaches and strategies for effectively combining commissioned work and long-term research. The 5th question is, what are the conditions that are necessary for meaningfully combining and balancing commissioned work and long-term research? To get to those 2 questions, we proposed a set of 3 questions to talk about your individual experiences. The first one being asking each person in a think tank organization to share how you combine commissioned work and long-term research and talk about where it was successful. And then the second question is how one type of work enriched the other work with specific examples. And then the third question has to do with outputs, knowing that sometimes we think of scholarly papers coming from long-term research and reports coming from commissioned work. So talking about the outputs that come from each process and any lessons about quality outputs.
Thank you for this opportunity. We have now had a chance to discuss a few examples that demonstrated 1 to 3. And we derived some strategies based on 1 to 3 for 4 and 5. And the approach that we decided, which would best combine the 2 commissioned work and the long-term research agenda, would be to access only those donors or funders whose funding priorities match with your own long-term research agenda. For example, DFID has a long-term research program on urban poverty, so which is very, very consistent with what some of us do. So that is just one example of how you can approach combining these 2 things quite effectively. Now, the strategies that we thought out, how many minutes do I have, Kathryn? Okay. Is that, okay. Strategy number 1 is to choose a topic which is consistent with the long-term research agenda of your institution and not to generally pick on any topic for which a lot of money is available. No, so it has to be consistent with your long-term research agenda. The second strategy that we think should be existing is that the expertise should be available in-house in your institution to undertake the particular project, which is also another indicator that the commissioned work is consistent with your long-term research agenda. And as far as the conditions go, we thought that there was only a very thin line between conditions and the approaches / strategies. And one important condition for us to decline a lot of money in the event of commissioned research is to ensure that there is some core funding already available. If that does not exist, I think it is very tempting for especially young think tanks to go after the money, even if it is not consistent with your long-term agenda. And the other condition that we discussed should exist for this should be is that there should be support from your board and your senior management to pursue your goals and priorities as far as your long-term governance and research is concerned. So I don't know if any of my table members want to add to anything that I may have inadvertently left out. Are we okay? Thank you.
Which table? Next.
I may ask my group to come in, but to keep it short, I'm not going to reiterate all of the different examples, which were great, that we shared around the table. It seemed to me that within this group there was a real recognition that we are not going to move away from doing commissioned work. And so I think a lot of the conversation centered around, well, what are the best approaches in which organizations can meaningfully do some commissioned work and yet retain their core research, their longer term research. And everybody here seemed to define that in the same way. So core research is really being able to identify the issues and work on those and develop those methodologies and et cetera. While commissioned work has a more responsive nature, a shorter term nature, et cetera, et cetera. But where I found the conversation was interesting was we seemed to spend some time on approaches or strategies for ways in which organizations can do the commissioned work and leverage it to become, to allow the organizations to be financially sustainable, to be aligned with their sort of longer term horizon strategies and mandates. So a few models were thrown around on ways that they can leverage this. One was the idea of owning an incredibly valuable data set and being able to mine that and harvest that through different commissioned research. The other one was to own a model, sort of an analytical model that, again, you would be able to reuse and be able to sort of generate a number of different commissioned pieces of work on that. Similar to that, a third one was the idea of a methodological specialization, being able to take an approach to different settings and apply that, and again, be able to continually use that again and again and get some sort of benefit from that. So those were some of the strategies that we talked about. Then we had an interesting discussion around the costing of research. And it's terribly important as organizations must take on commissioned work to make sure that they're charging a correct administrative overhead or an indirect cost to this so that they're not undermining the organizational capacity of each of the institutions. And I think that's something that's often overlooked. And there was a good conversation around that. It seems that there are a number of different models that each of the organizations are using, charging a higher rate for salaries where, for example, indirect costs may be limited by an organization and there may not be room for negotiation with that organization. So therefore, perhaps there's a higher salary rate. And in other cases where there seems to be an ability to charge a little bit more, they'll take some of those funds and income, if you want to call it that, and put it towards an endowment or some sort of fund that they can use at a later time more flexibly. So it was an interesting conversation. I think there seems to be some trend towards a lot of institutions are reducing the administrative overheads that institutions can charge, and so this is something that could be quite harmful moving forward. In the interest of time, I think I'll stop there unless anyone else wants to add something. Okay. Yeah, please.
What I am Cesar from Paraguay, from Instituto de Desarrollo. I was also commenting, probably wasn't in a very clear way, but I would like to mention our experience in dealing with this issue. In recent time, what we were doing is trying to separate what is the core research activity of Instituto de Desarrollo from what is becoming more and more increasingly just a consulting activity. And the direction in which we are working today is in creating business units, which are pretty much like companies, which are using the research developed at the Institute, and then the revenue from those business units are part of the revenue, of course, not entirely, is coming to fund the research activity. So that is the approach that we are taking, because we find that there is a very high risk in mixing the two things, and the alignment of the interest of the people sitting at the board of this research institution not necessarily is in line with a business unit. So we are now separating and creating the institutional framework to do in separate, but at the same time, combined way.
Who's reporting in this group?
My name is Miriam Omolo from Institute of Economic Affairs in Kenya. We've had different discussions, varied depending on institutions where we are coming from. One of the things that also determines the mix of commissioned and long-term work is your resource mobilization strategy. And example, in our institute, we had this strategy that you get core funding 70%, where you have, that's basically unrestricted funds. Restricted was 25%, then 5% was this commissioned or so whether solicited or unsolicited work. So in most cases, this also had implications on how you balance the two. But at the end of the day, you find that priority is given to long-term research. However, commissioned work runs in tandem with this, and there tends to be a lot of problems, especially implications on whether it's in-house research or working with consultants. So at the end of the day, the mix will largely depend on how you combine your resource mobilization strategy, which then shows whether you can balance the two or give priority to one. And a colleague from ECDPM who's also told us that there are cases where when the core funds are dwindling, you really have to increase the percentage of commissioned or consultancy to keep afloat. So it's a factor that really determines, and I don't know whether it's really in control of, all of us are in control of that. Sometimes, you know, you also react to what's happening in the market. Thank you.
Just a few things to add. One is why have commissioned work. Several reasons came from this table. To innovate, to stay sharp and benchmark yourself against the competition, to try new things, pilot with new ideas, but also for visibility and reputation. Now, coming along with that are some risks. The first risk is staff retention and the ability to meet deadlines when you have somebody who's leading this commissioned work either leave or not be available. So needing strategies for succession planning, more flexible contracts to maintain the deadlines and be able to deliver within that. And also contingency arrangements around reprioritizing long-term research to meet deadlines in short-term research. But sometimes the prestige value would push you to take on commissioned research, even if the dynamics are not always in the right direction. And then one other question was your independence, and whether sometimes when you do commissioned work, you compromise on the quality of the research because of what the client is commissioning and the implications of that in the long run, and whether you can feed that back into the long-term research and adjust for some of these short-term risks on quality.
Okay. In our table, we found. Sorry, I'm Paul Villarreal. I'm from Fundación Aru in Bolivia. I think that we share similar ideas in our table, but I think that we touched 2 points that are really important. First, maybe all the table said it, but it's important to match commission work and core research. It means that we have to choose work that is limited by our long-term research agenda. I know it's difficult, but we cannot leave our institutional objectives, and we have to continue doing work that will feed our long-term agenda. And I think I think that all of the table think that this is really important because it concerns to our budget plan and our financial sustainability. It's important to find a right proportion between core funding and funds generated by commission work, but and it appears in our discussion, there's no magic plan in this area, and it's something that each institution have to found in each context. And it's difficult, but we need commission work, but we need core research that is maybe most important, and we have to try to make the link between these both things. Maybe someone want to add something?
Yeah, thank you. I'm John Okidi from IDRC Nairobi office. Yeah, we also had experiences where commission work should be taken on and carried forward to publishable outputs even after fulfilling the commission work requirement. And that could entail negotiating with the agency commissioning work to you to allow you to do that, because in some cases, some contracts don't allow you to carry the product beyond the specification required in the contract. So if you can manipulate it and also let commission work contribute to the publication building of your organization, that would be a great strategy to use. And it's a useful strategy for relationship building, image building towards long-term sustainability. So when you choose, you make sure that you strategically position this commission work opportunity for purposes of image building, relationship building, and long-term sustainability. And commission work has been viewed at our table as a good way to limit dependence on core funding. In the event that something happens in the country source of your core funding, given the financial economic crisis, you should be able to have that reputation to continue attracting commission work larger and longer term to keep you going as a research organization. The other question we tried to deal with was whether, no, I think I'll leave that, whether government in these countries contribute to endowment funds for respective research organizations, but we didn't discuss this to a large extent. I think let me stop there. I thought I would highlight those. If there's anything to add, let a member add.
No, I don't want to add anything, but if we have a discussion, I would like to reflect on the issue that was raised by Franny, the question of independence.
Sorry, I've reclaimed the microphone to add an important point that was, no, actually when Sefa took the microphone, I remember the point he had made, which was that commission resources mobilized contribute to measuring success as demanded for by core funding sources. We begin to ask you, how are you positioning yourself to sustain yourself after we, the core funder, co-funders leave. So the more strategically mobilized commission resources you accumulate, the more you are judged to be successful in mobilizing alternative funding. So this is a role that commission work also plays. We discussed this at our table. Thank you.
Regarding the independence, I just want to share our experience. I mean, we had this kind of experience in one of the projects. We had a project with a trade union, with the private sector, with the chamber in Addis Ababa. And we did a study on, private sector development, private sector-led growth. We agreed on the terms of reference. We did a study, and we presented the study to the board of the chamber. And the chamber board said this is not a bankable project, meaning this is not a project that we can take to the government. We told them, well, look, we do not want to hide. I mean, so the question we raised is, do you deny the facts that we have put in this document? They said everything is right, but the government will not be happy with this. So we told them the purpose of this document is not to, the purpose of the assignment was not to develop a bankable project to the government, but a source document from which you can draw in your engagement with the government. So you have the information on the table. It's up to you to approach the government and to design policies and approach to, they didn't accept it, so we had to abandon it. And that depends on the value of the organization. So yes, you can compromise if organizations do not have their values implied or in their organization, but we refused, and we even lost money because of that. So this challenge is a constant challenge, and I think it depends on the value of the organization, whether to make complacence or stand by its value and say this is the fact. So we are researchers, we are professional, we are guided by the professional ethics, and I think we don't want to hide the facts. Well, this is, sorry. I think, so this is a kind of principle that I think research institutions should consider. Thank you.
So there's general agreement amongst us about think tanks taking commissioned work, but we've heard a variety of strategies and ways of balancing, ways of combining, and different considerations and conditions. So continue the open discussion. Sue?
Thank you. One of the things that the discussion at our table led me to reflect on is the number of times we talk about commissioned work in relation to the key question of, is it consistent with a long-term research agenda? And I'd like to put out a challenge that maybe that's not the right question. Maybe the question is this consistent with the long-term positioning and reputation of our organization? Because I think so many of the issues that we've been talking about really are at that institutional level as opposed to one aspect of the institution, which is its research agenda. There's so much more in there, and actually many of those elements came out in, I hope I'm saying your name right, Liki's presentation this morning about relationship building, and about sustainability, and even about, that question of, is this consistent with our principles? And I think that, again, putting the question into that larger, that sort of larger set of debates causes us to reflect much more about institutions and those different aspects of institutions, research quality being one and research agenda being one, but also the organizational development and the policy linkages being others. Because another aspect that we got into at our table very much relates to the organizational development side of things, which was the idea of flexible staffing when you are thinking about whether you take something on or not. And we had a few strategies that were discussed, like a roster of consultants, different types of contracts for staff, asking staff to have more than one research specialty. So again, I think this whole question has all those different aspects of what we in TTI often come back to, those three different elements of our institutional strengthening. And so just wanted to put that out.
Good point. Let's keep drilling down. And the discussion is rich. I'm going to say it now so I don't forget to say it later. Those who did take notes in each of the groups, don't hesitate to give your notes to our reporter at the end of the room. It will help us to do a better synthesis paper at the end.
Thank you. Your last reflection made me realize of another important reason why we should do commission work. If we are more of a research institution and we are asked to have policy influence, it's not going to be possible if not we are not close to the government at some point. If we don't do the networking with the policy officials, if we don't know how they work. So when we take more of not consultative but commission, we won't even get paid sometimes, but that's a risk that we have to take.
Samuel.
I'd also like to make a point consistent with what Sue was saying, actually. The way it goes round is consultancy has destroyed institutions, which means commission studies destroys institutions. I want to argue that what destroys institutions is something else. If you don't have priorities, you go taking anything, everything which comes, whether it is research or consultancy, it will destroy the institution. Because you will not position yourself to excel in a particular area where you are recognized as the. So it goes into quality and reputation. You undermine that, whether it's research or commission studies. So the core is priorities and positioning yourself. But second, the institutions which have been destroyed by consultancies are those which allow individuals working for the institutions and here doing consultants on the side, like private business. If you allow that, whether you are doing research that way or commission studies that way, you will destroy the institution. So it's very easy to have an identification problem here. When people see an institution destroyed, immediately they jump into saying, commission studies destroyed it. No, it's either allowing private operation within an institution or allowing taking everything from left and right and not positioning yourself as an institution which will be recognized for quality in a particular area of research. Maybe our last point is on independence. We also had a case where we did a study for the commission for these industrialists. But then the study was favorable to one group because we thought it was in the national interest in terms of industrialization. So those who were industrializing were favored. Those who were importing and actually undermining industry did not like us for that study. And therefore, because they were making contributions, that group refused to contribute, so we also lost money. But after 2 years, they wanted to come to us again, so they had to find some money to pay us before they could approach us. And so we recovered the money. And that particular, and that particular study now, last night, actually, I got a phone call from the Permanent Secretary of Finance, because yesterday they were discussing the budget, and the minister was put on hot soup. Yes, really. So he's on that particular industry, relating to the study we did 5 years ago. So the minister yesterday was saying they don't read. He's a new minister, he has not read that report. His permanent secretary has not read that report. But because it was known, somebody mentioned him that, that report was done by so and so. So the permanent secretary called me last night saying, now how do we handle this? This is the issue, we understand you did that study then. So I reminded him, he had not seen it, but the main findings and what the issues are and how the minister should handle it in terms of tax policy. So the same report which for a while we lost money, in the longer run, it is still being used for policy influence. So I'm hopeful today the minister will use the same points to convince Parliament that that's the right way to go.
I was getting so involved in the discussion, I forgot I was facilitator and have to keep time.
One quick comment regarding Sue's response to the research agenda versus research quality. That's very well taken. I think we should not lose sight of the overall organizational view. The only reason why we looked at the balance between commissioned work and long-term research was because of the emphasis on whether or not this would affect peer-reviewed publication. And I very much think that organizational performance, broader issues of research quality, policy linkages, communication to the government and to the media of your findings, I think they are all, reflected in your research agenda in some sense. To give you one short brief example, one of the objectives of the perspective plan of the Public Policy Research at Public Affairs Center is to collaborate and network with other institutions in this endeavor of producing public policy research. And one of the ways in which that disseminates itself is through an international conference on public policy and governance that you can probably do, and one of the outputs would be directly what we are emphasizing here. So while I do understand and appreciate that these are all very important components, I think that organizational performance, research quality, and policy linkages, all the quintessential part of all that would be in your research agenda, which is the reason why I think in this table we talked a little bit more about that. I just wanted to clarify our stance. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, if there were one or two other comments, we could take them. And if I don't see hands going into the air, okay, I see one. If there are others, we can take them. And then we'll be moving the workshop toward, we'll be wrapping up because it's almost 1 o'clock.
So Sam and I did not choreograph this, but actually I'm going to pick up on his point about stuff that languishes for a while and then gets picked up. I've actually spent most of my career in policy shops in government as opposed to in more of a research organization. And I can't say that the Canadian context would be similar around other places, but what we often did was there was a particular idea. Sometimes we pulled it from the outside that we wanted to move ahead in government. And we went ahead and did the work, and sometimes it just went nowhere. And so what you did was exactly that. You put it on the shelf knowing that at some point it's going to come back. And almost invariably, 2 years later, we'd pull it out, dust it off, do a very quick update, and in fact then move it forward. And so I think that's important in terms of, both thinking about how think tanks operate and how policymakers operate. Sometimes you're looking for that window of opportunity, but you have to have the basics done so you can quickly pull it up, update it, and then get it out there. And I think that's another important research strategy to be thinking about. Thanks.
And I think Halida's getting ready for a brief synthesis. And I think we've really covered the issue well in terms of different strategies in think tanks in Africa, Latin America, Asia, for combining long-term research and commissioned work, especially for organizational development, for reputation, for financial sustainability. I think one issue that we could explore more in the future would be kind of the question 3. How in these two different processes are we combining data sets, combining experience gained in commissioned work that gets reinvested in our long-term research? How are we doing policy briefs in one area that are nourishing the other? So we haven't as much seen the connections there, but you always need to leave some unexplored questions for the future. Just before handing it over to Halida, wanted to remind you that on each table there is a survey that talks about the current balance between commissioned work and long-term research within your think tank organization. So if you are in a think tank organization, please do take a few minutes to fill it out and to leave it with Lily as you leave the room. There is also a short evaluation form, and we invite everyone to take a couple of minutes to also fill out the evaluation form. Leave that with Lily on your way out. I've asked you for 2 things. I'm going to ask you for a third as well, especially for those who don't need to fill out the survey because you're not with a think tank organization. Now that we've engaged on this topic of commissioned work in long-term research, we still have some of the literature on the walls. We do invite you to respond to a couple of the citations before you leave the room to go to lunch. And it will be your contribution, an additional contribution to the synthesis report that will come out of this workshop. So while you're working, we'll
Thank you. I think I need to apologize before saying anything if I've missed out on any of the important point which has been mentioned in this room. So, but I'm sure that they are written on a piece of paper. We can take it and later on incorporate it. I think largely what I feel is that the concerns or the thoughts were very similar. But I've pointed out, I've marked actually, after having written each and every remark made by the participant over here, I've just marked some of them. And I think some of the important points were that it's very important to synergize if we are looking for the commissioned work with the other projects. I think time and again it has been emphasized that is what should be the length and the volume of the work which is there, which is very, very, very important to consider when it is being done. Why actually do we need to do the commission work? The participants did express the view that the need would continue because of the lack of the capacity existing within the civil society institutions, the private sector universities, and since there is a local capacity development, or there is a dearth of the capacity existing within the people working in these institutions, public sector and the private sector, the need would continue to be there. So more of a partnership with the civil society, that also does work as a reason for it. I think one very important point raised was that the commissioned work does help in contributing, strengthening the endowment. However, it was also emphasized that it is very, very important and crucial to actually be very careful as to what percentage of commission work is being done, if and the institutions are also involved with the other core research. This is for those institutions which do have the other core research. I think it was also raised that if the selection of the commission work is done cautiously, it can prove to be very, very beneficial for the other core research activities. So instead of taking it to be something which deviates the person from actual core work, it can actually prove to be beneficial also. However, keeping oneself or the work plan very rational, it is very important to have some sort of a vision. And I even pointed out when I was speaking on the issue, probably my personal experience is that the medium-term plan does help in rationalizing the work agenda and the other type of work which can be taken up. But very importantly, and I do agree on this point, that the commission work does help in generating the data. The TTI is mostly there in the developing countries, and I don't know about the other countries, but I do know there is an absolute dearth of the reliable data there in Pakistan. So it does help in building the data which is much required. From whatever sort of points emerged from the group discussions, I think again some were very similar which were made to the main presentations, but I would like to re-emphasize them because it also means that there is a general thinking about those very issues. For example, time and again, I think it came forward that the emphasis was laid on that the Commission work needs to be consistent with the long-term agenda as such. It shouldn't be deviating totally in isolation. And I think again, one more thing which has been that if one core funding is ensured by the institution, then that dependency or an all-out dependency on the Commission work, that minimizes, so the level of the distraction would not be there. So the importance of having at least one core funding is very, very important to maintain the quality of the work and the quality of the research which comes out of it. However, I think very rightly pointed out by the members of the Group C, and Group C is your group, because I think they emphasized on the importance of having the resource mobilization strategy. Very often, this is also very true because the institutions and organizations do not have a strategy, a clear-cut strategy as to how they would like to make their institution or organization or think tank, call it whatever you would like to call it, financially viable and sustainable. So having that kind of a strategy is extremely crucial, and it is beneficial also. But I think I like this point very much because many a times, and it was again, it came out from Group C, to keep oneself in market, because how do you get the core funding? If you're not located in the capital, if your organization is not there in the capital of that particular country where most of the donors are situated, then you feel left out. So how do you make yourself visible or noticeable or be seen by them? So it can be used as an important market tool also to market your own self. The visibility factor cannot be ignored, and of course, these small short-term researches in initial phase of the making of any institutions do undoubtedly help in establishing the credibility of these institutions and organizations. Credibility and integrity are built over the number of years, so in the initial years, I think they do play a very, very important role. However, note of caution was given on that compromise on the research quality should not be there. And last point is, last 2 points are that one, again, it was emphasized that it is important for the image building and the relationship building. Relationship building was raised in the context of networking with the civil society institutions or the organization, which do not have the capacity, but many a times, for example, SPDC has done voluntary work for quite a number of the civil society. We don't charge 100,000, 500,000 rupees from these civil society institutions. They have the data, we go them, we build the capacity, we do the analysis for them, we take the people on board, and we come back without charging them any money. So I think that kind of a relationship building, which also helps in the capacity development of very small non-governmental organizations, is also something which gives you a sense of satisfaction of being able to do the good work. But lastly, and I think you expressed the fear on quality and reputation being compromised, and I think that is always there in our mind. We never forget that the quality and the credibility of the institution should never be put at stake. So it is important to I think in a nutshell, what emerged was that Commission work does support these institutions who are all there in the developing countries. However, there is a need to strike that very delicate balance between the two, and any sort of a disequilibrium in a very careless manner would then reflect badly on the quality. Thank you. I hope I did the justice. Thank you.
Thanks, Halida. Thanks to the resource people. Thanks to everyone for your big spirit of sharing and learning and your active participation. Have a good lunch. We tried to finish pretty much on time so that you can be back for the 2 o'clock workshop. Don't forget to read and comment the literature.